How do investors create value in uncertain times? Fears of inflation, COVID-19 variants, and geopolitical tensions. Should you stay invested? And will some regions outperform others? Well, to answer these questions, I'm joined by James Chiu, Chief Investment Officer, Southeast Asia for Private Banking and Wealth Management at HSBC, and Sanjay Mathur, Chief Economist for Southeast Asia and India at ANZ. Welcome to both of you. So let's talk the big picture trends and threats for investors in 2022. The big question on the minds of most of us these days is, when is everything going to get back to normal, right? So every time we seem to be making some progress, we're heading in the right direction, new challenges emerge, the Delta variant and now the Omicron variant. How does this uncertainty, though, impact the global economic recovery? James?
What's going to happen is that we have to sort of live and adapt with the variant. We've seen Delta, Omicron, and there will be something else further down the road. And of course, that means a lot of adaptation in terms of the economy. There will be phases of start and stop. And I think that's how it's going to be very much. But I think 2022 will be one of normalization. Yes, there will be uncertainty associated with the Omicron, but I think the world in more ways than one are getting much more prepared. When you look at vaccination, when you look at the advancement in treatment, I think 2022 is still going to be a good year, a year of recovery, a year of growth, but of course that growth would be slower compared to 2021.
Sanjay, let's bring you in the conversation now. The process as we move towards normalization, a kind of a process of stops and starts with progress. How far will the pandemic continue to have this uneven impact, as it were, on international business?
I think the best way of picturizing the situation is that, yes, there will be interruptions, but they will become less frequent than what we saw last year. So if we were operating at 50% in terms of international business, I think we will move towards 75% this year. And the reason why I say it is because a lot of things have changed. So we've got quicker PCR testing results, we've got shorter quarantine periods. So I think that every year we will see progress. We may not get to 100%, we will know, but the progress is certainly in the right direction.
On the point of growth, James, ADB downgraded growth projections for most Southeast Asian economies, except for Singapore and the Philippines. But some have pointed to this part of the world as being a region to watch. James, why is that the case? And what can we expect for 2022 for Southeast Asia?
The pent-up demand, especially in consumption in Southeast Asia, will be strong in 2022. And we think that 2022 is still going to be a stronger year for Southeast Asia compared to last year, really because of this pent-up demand, and also really because that investment spending has been lagging in Southeast Asia over the last few years. And that also could actually have an acceleration and an effect to kickstart Southeast Asia for 2022. And I think that's going to be one of the key trends to watch out for.
Sanjay, do you agree with him that Southeast Asia is going to be a region to watch, Southeast Asian equities specifically, for investors?
So to put it in perspective, I think that Southeast Asia will be the largest incremental gainer from the reopening trade. So if you look at tourism, even it comes back 30%, 40%, certainly it's a change. There will be more mobility. So if I were to look at the delta from 2021, this year will certainly see the maximum gains accruing to Southeast Asia. Now that's where the good news really starts, because we've been through 2 years of the pandemic. That's really taken a toll on household finances, on job creation, etc. So after a while, let's say 6 months down the road, I think we will have to reassess that how quickly or how much further we can move. And one of the things we have estimated is to look at when do per capita incomes actually get to 2019 levels. And unfortunately for Thailand, for Philippines, for Malaysia, we are not getting there until 2023. So it's a long grind, really.
James, you've spoken to us before about inflation in 2021 and the impact of that. As the global economy recovers for 2022, what can we expect to see with regards to inflation? How could investors brace for yet more of this?
This year, 2022, what we're going to see, hopefully, is that supply bottlenecks should actually start to normalize itself, especially in the second half of 2022. And also that whole pent-up demand, at least on the global level, should start to slow down at the same time. So if that's the case, what we will see is that inflation, at least for the second half of 2022, should start to fall. But meanwhile, of course, there is going to be high readings, and of course, it's going to be very uncertain, especially with Omicron. And of course, a lot depends on how the world and of course, policymakers adjust to this new variant.
Sanjay, how are investors going to brace themselves for what we're likely to see with rising inflation in 2022?
This is a debatable issue, but my view is that Asia does not have a serious inflation problem. We should remember that when we look at inflation in, say, the US, a lot of it was due to very heavy sort of fiscal transfers in the form of just checks being given out to households. So there's a shortage of labor. We don't have that issue here. Second, we're still at a very early stage of the recovery. So that means that corporates cannot really pass on increases in costs. So they will probably, the impact would come through profit margins than in terms of inflation. Third, for inflation to endure, you really need a credit cycle. Nowhere in Asia can we say that credit is growing rapidly. So I wouldn't want to place it as a serious issue for Asia. I do think that this is more of a Western problem right now.
And with all of this uncertainty still, in the periphery, James, what's your top tip for investors for 2022?
I think going into 2022, it has to be very differentiated. And we think that Southeast Asia equity markets will be one of the regions that could actually outperform, really, because it has actually lagged the world in many parts in terms of its performance. And because of the reopening and the strong growth, we could see an outperformance in Southeast Asia. But I think what's very important for every investor is to be diversified across asset class. And I think in that sense, 2022 will be a year in which diversification and portfolio resilience is going to be extremely important given the uncertainty that we face.